Let's do some audience questions. First one is from Annie. Hey, David, why is left-wing terrorism just not as prevalent as right-wing terrorism? This is a very, very hot button and touchy issue. And there are even people who will deny that the basis of the question is true, but it is true, right? Groups that study this stuff have made it clear that in the United States, domestic terrorism, overwhelmingly right-wing and not left-wing. Couple things that I want to say. Number one, you used to more commonly see eco-terrorism. We talked about eco-terrorism earlier this week on a bonus show, in fact. And eco-terrorism is one of the specific subsets of terror that is considered to be more left-wing because it's obviously for the good of the environment, which tends to be something that the left is more concerned with than the right. But that has diminished greatly over the last several decades. I think the answer is quite simply, when you look at what motivates a left-winger and a right-winger to sort of take personal action systemically at a fundamental level, you understand why the right is more likely to go to terrorist activity, right? So on the left, when you see left-wing ideology, socialism, for example, or more social democracy, right? More social welfare programs, rights for all. The underlying idea is, even though it goes against what the status quo is, it wants to change the status quo. It's about going against sort of corporate power, authoritarian power, and it's about empowering the individual. It's about egalitarianism. It's about nonviolence, etc. So by its very nature, if you want health care for all because you believe that health is a right everyone is entitled to, you don't want to go and start killing people, right? And that's one of the real things that didn't make sense about the eco-terrorism trend, which is presumably you care about the environment because the environment relates to the health of the organisms on the earth. So you're kind of at odds with that if you go and you're willing to kill people in order to improve everybody's health by saving the environment. It doesn't really make sense, right? That exists with healthcare for all. That exists with ideas like universal basic income, reducing inequality. It's all meant to lift people up, particularly people from the bottom. So it's not an ideology that at its core lends itself to terrorism. When you look at the right and what motivates the right, especially the far right, you see people who want to, for example, impose their worldview on all others, whether it's the Christian extremists or the gun fetishists or whoever. So if you want to impose your view on others, that is a form of aggression or violence in and of itself. You're not allowing others to sort of live freely the way that they want. And you're more likely to take the view that if they're not going to come over to my side, I don't even know that I want them alive. I don't even know that they deserve to be alive. So there's a much more direct link between saying, here's what I am becoming an activist for. And I sort of hesitate to call these far-right extreme terrorist activists, but they probably see themselves as such. So it's much easier to understand why they would be moved to violence and terrorism against others in order to push their ideology. I think that that's the simplest way I can explain it. It's sort of at its core an issue of what it is they are activating for.
Yeah, and in thinking of right-wing terrorism, these right-wingers aren't just right-wing in the sense that they want lower taxes and less government. They're all the way out there. They want to destroy the government. They want to avenge some atrocities committed by the government.
That they believe, of course.
Like the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh went and killed 168 people there to avenge for the deaths at Waco.
Yeah.
Think of Dylan Roof at the Charleston Church. I mean, that was an anti-diversity thing.
That's right.
Wanted to kill black people specifically.
Right.
So it is very fringe.
It's also that there is a way, and again, you have to sort of think about the internal logic of some of these people. There's a way to think that the problem you're trying to solve can partially be solved by getting rid of people that are part of the problem. Whereas if you just want health care for all, there's no solution by going out and killing people. I guess you could say, well, if we killed the politicians against health care for all, but it's so antithetical to sort of the basic tenets of what you're trying to achieve, it just doesn't compute. So I think that for the most part, that is the idea that explains to us why we see so much more right-wing terror than left-wing terror. And with religion is a big part of it, right? So religious fundamentalism, which is at its core a right-wing ideology, also gets people to do violent things, and we see that across religions, right? We see extremist Christians, extremist Muslims, and extremists in sort of other religions as well take to violence in that way.